What is going on, AP people? We have a video for you today on America's first political parties, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. So hopefully I'll be able to clarify a lot of issues on these two political parties. So let's get going. All right, when we're talking about the Federalists, we need to establish which Federalists are we talking about. Well, there's really two different versions. There's a 1780s version and the 1790s forward version. So when we're talking about the 1780s, think about what's going on in American history at that time. We have the Articles of Confederation is coming to its untimely death or timely death, depending on how you look at it. And we also have the birth of the Constitution. So the original Federalists were those from the 1780s that favored the ratification or the approval of the Constitution and a stronger central government. So some key Federalists that advocated or favored the ratification were these three people here, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison, and they were the authors of the Federalist Papers. So one thing to pay close attention to is we have James Madison here, who is one of the authors of the Federalist Papers and also known as the father of the Constitution. In the 1780s, he was a Federalist because he favored the Constitution. This is not a political party in the 1780s. When we get to the 1790s and the birth of a political party known as the Federalists, James Madison is not a Federalist. So the 1790s version is a political party led by this guy over here, Alexander Hamilton. Okay, so make sure you understand when we're talking political parties, we're talking 1790s after. When we're talking about those that favored the Constitution, that's the 1780s version, and it does not necessarily mean you are a Federalist political party member. Okay, let's go to the other side. We're going to talk about Democratic Republicans, and they're also known as Democrats, Republicans, or Jeffersonians. So two key people that you should know are Thomas Jefferson on the left and James Madison on the right. And James Madison was Thomas Jefferson's protege. I'm going to show you a picture of James Madison here. So here, what you're looking at now is James Madison, probably the most famous picture of James Madison, certainly one of the most famous pictures. And then there's this guy. That's James Madison old. He did not age well. Look at this. How do we go from that to this? That to this. That to this. Poor guy. But he was president. Okay, so what helped create the political parties? Let's figure out what caused the development of political parties. Well, keep in mind the founding fathers did not foresee political parties. They did not envision this, and nowhere in the Constitution are political parties even mentioned. And as the political parties were developing, Washington tried to stay above the parties and even urged people not to be members of political parties. He warned against them. Hamilton received much opposition to his financial plan that he proposes in the early 1790s when he's Secretary of Treasury under George Washington. And the big thing that upset his opposition was the Bank of the United States, or the BUS. And this was led by Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson. So he did not agree with a lot of Hamilton's ideas. So the two key players in Washington's cabinet, Hamilton and Jefferson, had different ideas on not only about the country, but how it should be run and who should be in power. And this really led to the birth of political parties. So eventually, two parties emerge, and the two leaders are going to be Hamilton leading the Federalists and Jefferson leading the Democratic Republicans. Okay, so we're going to go over a summary of these two political parties. I would encourage you to know virtually everything on this chart here, or on this table here. So when we're talking about Democratic Republicans and Jeffersonians, one thing to keep in mind, no matter what I'm talking about here, these are like general ideas. Of course, you can find exceptions to the rule, but generally when we talk about, like, for example, who supported Democratic Republicans, it would be the commoners or the middle class. And when we talk about who supported the Federalists, that would generally be the wealthy and the aristocrats. Of course, you can find exceptions. For instance, Thomas Jefferson was very wealthy and he was an aristocrat, but he was a Democratic Republican. So, interpretation of the Constitution, let's talk about how the Constitution should be interpreted. Should it be strictly interpreted or loosely interpreted? And the Democratic Republicans, led by Jefferson, especially when it came to the bus, favored a strict interpretation. And they said you could only do what the Constitution states. So unless the Constitution gives Congress or the government the power to do something, they cannot. Hamilton took the opposite view, or a loose interpretation, and basically said, look, unless the Constitution says we cannot do something, then that means we can. And it'll be interesting when we get to the Louisiana Purchase, these two political parties are going to flip-flop their interpretations. So let's talk about foreign policy. The Democratic Republicans were pro-French. They appreciated that they were an ally during the Revolution, and they also distrusted the British and the monarchy. Whereas the Federalists, led by Hamilton, were pro-British, and it really all comes back to money. Hamilton was a huge advocate of trade, and he saw Britain as this enormously powerful country that if the U.S. could develop a good trading relationship with, then the U.S. would get lots of money. So their foreign policies are quite different. Now, the economy is a big difference between these two. Jeffersonians believed that the economy should be based on agriculture, and Jefferson believed that farming should be the backbone of the economy. He thought farmers were the most important thing to the U.S. economy. Hamilton took the opposite approach, and he believed that merchants and trade were the most important thing to this economy. And in the long run, Hamilton actually prevails on this issue. So let's go back to the bus. What started it all? What started the two political parties? The Democratic Republicans disliked it. They felt that it favored the rich and it was favored a select group of people. And also because nowhere in the Constitution did it say the bus could be created. Whereas the Federalists were hugely in favor of this, and they believed that it would help stimulate the economy and help build credit. Okay, so know these ideas because they kind of differentiate the two political parties. All right, there's a brief video on the Democratic Republicans and Federalists. I hope that helped. If you could take a moment, please subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and please help me spread the word. If you know anybody who would benefit from this, somebody in your class, a friend from another school, anybody who would benefit, please help me spread the word. Throw us on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, put on Vine. Just help me spread the word. I would greatly appreciate it. If you need me to clarify anything, you have questions, comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I really appreciate you guys watching this, and have a good day, guys.